What is potentially going to change in terms of the solar tax credit with this so-called big, beautiful bill?
What the residential solar industry is looking at is a removal of the investment tax credit for residential systems.
In Australia, you can get a solar system for about half the price you can get here in the States, and it really shouldn't be that way. We have the largest market.
Cutting a credit system 7 years short and giving a 6-month notice to an industry is for something that's like in the 30% range. I think we're going to see probably 100,000+ trade jobs lost in 26.
All right. Welcome back to the Solar Surge podcast. If you're new to the Solar Surge podcast, on this show, we meet with the top CEOs and the top business leaders in the solar and energy storage space. Now, this morning, I'm joined by James Showalter. He's the CEO and founder of EG4 Electronics, one of the major players in the off-grid and hybrid solar and battery storage space. And today, we're going to be discussing potential implications of the loss of the residential solar tax credit. So, James, it's really good to see you again. Thanks for coming back onto the channel.
Appreciate it, Joe. Always excited to talk with you.
Yeah, same here. I mean, every time we do videos together, the audience seems to respond really well to it. Of course, you've been doing solar systems since you were a teenager, and just a wealth of information for the audience, and they really are appreciative of that. But I understand recently you've been busy back and forth between Texas and Washington, D.C., lobbying congressmen, lobbying senators about seeing what we can do to save and preserve the residential solar tax credit. So for those that haven't been following the issue as closely, can you just kind of take it from a high level view? What is potentially going to change in terms of the solar tax credit with this so-called big, beautiful bill?
Absolutely, Joe. So, the status right now, just to make sure everyone's clear, there's a massive reconciliation bill that's going to deal with a lot of different questions in government, balancing the budget, tax cuts, etc. That has left the House. It passed the House by one vote, and there are narrow margins in the House and the Senate, and it's headed to the Senate from the House. And in that bill, the problem that people are facing is to renew the 2017 era tax cuts for businesses and corporations. We're going to have to make up money on other places. And so one thing that was done is very drastic, right? The U.S. debt ceiling, I think, is hitting a new reality for a lot of people in D.C. because they always kept assuming they could push it up. But the U.S. debt ceiling is now, higher than our GDP per year. And we're crossing a threshold where we could see some severe consequences if we don't cut money. So that all that pressure is on Congress. And frankly, I think everybody as an American has to see this deliver. We don't want to see our currency system collapse because we can't stop spending too much money. And so one of the things that just got thrown in as an entire tranche is the $1 to $2 trillion IRA Green New Deal program from the Biden administration. And unfortunately, the Bush era 2005 25D residential tax credits are strapped onto that. So what the residential solar industry is looking at is a removal of the investment tax credit for residential systems over the next several, actually by the end of this year instead of 7 years from now. So a 7 years early cut on residential tax credits for solar and storage.
Okay, so I know that many of the people watching this are familiar with this. Right now, as it exists today, there's a 30% residential renewable energy tax credit, which, if you have tax liability or tax equity, essentially you can have 30% knocked off the price of your solar power system. Yeah. James, how important is that extra 30% in driving demand for residential solar?
Well, this is where I think I've got unstandard answers. A lot of people pushing for it is like absolutely essential. Every year we're going to watch the technology price drop, Joe. So, and I think like my job as a hardware guy is to drop my technology costs, is to innovate. It's important from a standpoint of fairness, which is I think the biggest problem here, right? And fairness and engagement. So, without the residential tax credit, which is about 2% of the budget of the IRA, it's 98% of the money is going to solar farms and corporate interests and stuff like that. But the homeowners, without that tax credit, homeowners are put at a disadvantage in investing in energy generation equipment. So, if we start on the top level with the energy emergency that President Trump declared right after coming into office, if we're actually serious about responding to that, homeowners with a battery storage system can typically cut about 2 to 3 homes worth of peak demand off the grid while connected on a virtual power plant. And so homeowners can be tens of millions of people that are part of a solution to this and in preventing energy scarcity over the next 7 years. The problem is that if you're a homeowner, you can only invest in generation with post-income tax money. So that's money that you've already paid income tax on, Joe. And that's, I think, the inherent correction that the 25D sought to implement was, if you've got a $20,000 system that someone's buying that has solar and storage, if someone makes 25% tax bracket in the middle class, they're a middle class homeowner, they got 25% tax bracket, they had to earn about $27,000 in order to buy that, pay their 25% tax, and then buy their $20,000 system. So what the tax credit did was, okay, well, instead of giving you your $7,000 back that you paid in income tax to buy the system, we're going to give you a credit of 30% on the 20, which is $6,000, and that will be used against future taxes. So it's kind of like going to a hardware store and they give you a store credit card instead of your money back. But this corrects a reality where without this credit, homeowners are at a 30% plus disadvantage compared to utility companies and businesses. So if we're serious about responding to an energy emergency in this country, being fair to homeowners would be a really good step. And I think that's just one inherent problem that would dog the industry, 7+ years in advance for something that was of incredibly fractional amount of cost to the government, and frankly was funded by taxpayers' own money.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, based on what you're saying, it's a small drop in the bucket for the overall, so-called Inflation Reduction Act, that they push through. The thing that bothers me about this, James, if I'm understanding this correctly, is that it's individual homeowners that are losing out, whereas the commercial solar farm owners, like the commercial solar developers, as well as the solar leasing companies, are still going to be able to take advantage of all those subsidies. Am I reading that correctly?
Well, that was initially the plan, and I've got to be clear on this. There is a green lobby in D.C. that put together the IRA, intends to use residential installers to get, they give them 2% of the money, and they try to use residential installers as the face of solar and the, help Johnny Main Street kind of pitch. But yeah, the green lobby's intention was to sell out homeowner-owned systems, sell out the 25D, and just kind of tacitly keep leases going on instead. So that was the initial phase of this conversation. There was an initial version of this bill, and then what you saw before it got out of the House was a revolt from some of the more fiscally conscious members. So, the Green Lobby guys weren't expecting that a lot of the Republican representatives were going to read the proposal and say, wait a minute here, this doesn't save money at all. All that it is a token cut of homeowners, but all the money is just going to go to leases, and leases cost taxpayers 2 to 3 times more. It's a direct subsidy on a business fleet that can not only get the tax credit, but can also write off the system. See, a business and a utility, this goes back to the point of the imbalance that 25D corrected back in the day. A business and a utility can write off investments, but a homeowner can't. So the way that the 25D facilitates an equal tax credit for homeowners is critical here. But yeah, they were trying to use that as a we've cut the IRA thing. And it's just a very different year in Washington, D.C. The country is kind of out of money. And that's really what's starting to hit home to people. So unfortunately, that was the plan. By the time the bill got out of the House, a lot of House members that are budget hawks woke up to this, and they put a poison pill in the bill and said the commercial tax credit cannot be used to lease systems. And they also said that it was going to end in 60 days for new projects, which put a lot of people at risk that are safe harboring credits for leases and all that stuff, Joe. So it looked like initially it was going to be a major win for different lease companies that have big presences in DC. But this is a year where politicians have to do math, and definitely some that are doing math really stepped in and interrupted that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I've reported on this earlier in other videos that there does seem to be some very creative accounting going on with how the tax credits are evaluated, or the cost basis for the tax credit when you're talking about a leased system versus a purchased system. But again, hopefully they get this thing cleaned up here. But the way I'm hearing it right now, James, is that basically corporations are still going to have significant advantages. Homeowners are going to potentially lose out on this 30% tax rebate, which is kind of what makes the solar investment affordable for many people, or especially if they're borderline of will the system pay for itself. That 30% kicker helps push it over the edge. Now, James, one of the things you've spoken about in the past was this idea of decoupling solar and particularly the residential tax credit from the overall sort of green lobby progressive agenda. Can you speak a little bit more to that, please? Because I've always looked at solar as a nonpartisan issue, but I think a lot of people kind of get it mixed up, and they get it in their mind, attached to sort of this larger environmentalist or progressive agenda. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, look, it's like everything else in life. The friends that an industry picks have consequences, right? And I think, unfortunately, there have been too many residential installers that have been willing to work with the green lobby and not think about, what the big picture on this and how much that they can make this technology partisan on the homeowner side. So, to your point, the green lobby wants direct cash subsidies totaling over $1 trillion to solar farms and really all kinds of other, corporate held massive solar deployments that are funded a lot of times by sovereign funds out of Europe. And they want the American people to subsidize that stuff at a super expensive rate. So, and with the hope of it affecting the climate. And the green lobby always, you show them a green technology, there's no argument that means that there's not enough money for it. I think you say residential solar is rooted in a very, very different agenda. It's essentially what I call a right to generate agenda, right? And that is that, now that we live in a day where technology has been able to scale down, we have a technological solution like a solar panel, that, on the wholesale market, they're running up about $120 a panel or less. And we have a technological solution I can put in my backyard with the same cost efficiency that a massive utility scale solar farm can get. So, we have the first technology that can bring energy back to homeowners, which is where it originated in the beginning of the country. People used to cut wood in their backyard and burn it in their living room stove, and that's where I think that the battle line really should be for residential solar, which is we do not want any free government money, and we are not trying to sell a climate change return for taxpayer money. We just want an equal economy in which homeowners are able to contribute and compete in the energy space. So starting with your own power bill first, and then potentially supporting the grid during peak shaving moments in a virtual power plant.
That makes a lot of sense. And you're absolutely right. I mean, the technology exists today that at an individual household level, people can become energy independent. We can't necessarily bring our industry to that level right now. Our industry tends to consume more energy, heavy industry. But at the individual household level, if you get good sunlight to your house, between solar, inverter, battery storage, the technology is there for you to be energy independent and or energy neutral. Can you explain a little bit more? What do you mean when you say right to generate? Because wouldn't homeowners still have the right to generate even if they lost the tax credit? It would just be that they would be at kind of a financial disadvantage to the corporations. Is that right?
Yeah, no, I think there's about 4 things that people are going to run into in the right to generate setup. But this tax credit, I think, affects a fairness aspect of any right. If I tell you that you have a right and then we put you in a tax system that puts you at a structural disadvantage, then if it's a right without any fairness, that's really kind of dilutes the vision of a free market in which homeowners are treated as equals or treated as well as anybody else. I think that the voting tax paying homeowner section of the economy should always be treated at least on an equal footing as other corporations. So it's not that the right won't exist. It's the difference that because there's taxation is a massive part as to how people get capital and manage capital. To say that someone has a right and then not facilitate a fair structure around that right really just kind of acts in bad faith. I do think there will be other private property rights issues that utility companies may infringe on as people start generating their own power. But for now, as a country, we're just focused on responding to the energy crisis, which I think keeps everybody distracted on let's just all generate more power.
Okay. Well, James, you live in a red state. I live in a red state. And, again, I think, solar sometimes gets wrapped up in left-leaning politics, these larger agendas. What do Republican lawmakers need to hear specifically about climate change or renewable energy subsidies and tax credits? For those that might be listening out there, what do they need to know, and what would you like to see them change about the bill before the final version makes its way through the Senate?
Well, it's a moment where we feel like free market fundamentals. We kind of have to fight on both fronts here. We think that the IRA was very bad for the cost effectiveness of solar. We think that these corporate solar farms, if you look at China stopped subsidizing solar farms in 2017. Okay. And the number of solar farms continued to explode in China. The volume did. Basically, the companies got weaned off the subsidy and just put it in themselves based on a for-profit basis. So most green subsidies to businesses, I think, frankly, all of them, especially in a world where we're out of money, they need to get cut. That means the PTC. That means a lot of other aspects that are still untouched leaving the House that need to get serious cuts, that they're going to be hundreds of billions of dollars handed out still in the current form of the bill. So what I would say as a solar technology guy, as a guy who runs a solar business, the sooner that the subsidies conversation leaves the room, the sooner innovation will run the show, and we'll be doing more for less money and serving the American people that way. At the same time, there's always going to be a structural disadvantage to homeowners who are trying to invest in their own generation because they don't have a way to deduct the cost of that system. Most homeowners don't even itemize if there was a deduction. The 25D credit really facilitated just a system that returned some of the taxpayer money that a homeowner makes to buy a system. And this is, I think, a situation where maybe 50 to 70% of the people in the solar space are affected by 2% of the money in the IRA. I also think that any mechanism that we use to facilitate these tax credits can take some modification to make sure that it is updated for maximum impact. So I do think that the 25D itself could use some price caps, it could use some battery demands, it could use a few other things. But the fundamental problem that it addresses is a very serious one. And it comes down to the ability for homeowners to make their own power decisions, frankly, like they used to do before we had a PUC-driven economy. This is just facilitating a right that is older than electricity in the United States.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Of course, I'm for it. Philosophically, I'm for this 100%. But specifically, if there are lawmakers out there listening, watching this, specifically, what are you asking the Senate to do? Is it to just put the 25D credits back in, or what action should they take now?
Yeah, I think it needs to get extended, and I think it needs some protection modification, needs some childproofing. I think we need to look at price caps on systems that drop every year, which is going to drive competition to basically eliminate the cost. I think it's 2% of the IRA. It's not a lot, but just me as a technology guy, I think anytime government facilitates a solution like this, they should get something out of it. I think we could cut the cost in half over the following 7 years with a price cap that is somewhere around $3 a watt that drops 7% a year, that brings U.S. residential solar to a competitive space with the rest of the world. The residential solar in the U.S. is exceptionally high, exceptionally expensive. So to drive the industry in the right direction on cost and still facilitate fairness, but the cost of the systems would drop, so the overall cost of the program, currently it's about $1 billion a year. We think we could probably see that actual cost get cut in half as this is facilitated, price caps, and then also battery attachment. I think net metering is a big hot button issue, and a lot of power companies still are being forced by different activist groups to provide net metering, even though it costs your neighbors more to subsidize your own power in most cases. So battery attachment being a requirement. So these homes are actually supporting the grid with a battery bank as opposed to dumping unreliable energy onto the grid whenever they feel like it would be the other objective I'd achieve with it. So what I'd say is that it's preservable. It won't affect the cost of the budget reconciliation. It would probably protect 150,000 jobs, and it can be improved. We can get a good $7 billion back just adding a few common sense corrections. So I think it's a huge opportunity to steal the narrative from the green lobby on solar technology. We can support fairness for solar technology and at the same time not facilitate the kind of green scam that's running the country out of money, which is what we saw with the IRA.
Yep. No, I agree with you. And you touched on a good point too, which is that the rest of the world pays a lot less for its solar. And I know we have different ways of justifying the extra cost. We pay higher so-called soft cost. We pay higher, permitting related costs. We also pay higher financing related costs, whether it's financing fees or whether it's commissions to salespeople and marketing people. But in Australia, you can get a solar system for about half the price you can get here in the States, and it really shouldn't be that way. We have the largest market.
No, it's a major factor of competitiveness and economic drivers in a Main Street economy. The real promise of the residential solar and storage revolution is to return Main Street dollars to middle-class homeowners, which spur the economy in towns like Sulphur Springs, where I'm based, right? The objective is, how do we get people to invest in their backyards, drive electrician and trade jobs, and then save their monthly bill and break even and beyond to where they have free cash flow they can spend in local communities. So that's one of the few things that can change the equation for these smaller rural American towns and towns in Middle America. Is if people made their own power and got a good return. But we need cost-effective solar technology, and I also think we shouldn't retard that opportunity by not facilitating a homeowner tax return that the 25D created back in 2005. I mean, this was a Republican Congress, Republican president that pushed through. It was based in fairness and free market principles, not unlimited money to throw at a bunch of green corps because they promised that they'll save a few polar bears or something.
Right. Yeah, I mean, to me, it's just a no-brainer. It's a not partisan issue. It's an issue of energy security and national security. Right. The technology's here. People can be energy independent at a household level. Yeah. That's good for our national security, right? Regardless of what political, party you might align with. And basically what that 30% tax credit does is it just puts homeowners on equal financial footing with the utilities that have all these other tax advantages that they can take advantage of. Like you touched on earlier. Not only do they get the clean energy tax credit, but they also can depreciate the asset as well over time. So they're kind of double dipping in terms of tax benefit when a corporation owns a solar facility versus what a homeowner gets. So all we're saying here is, let the homeowner have the same financial advantage, or at least the same financial footing as the power company. If they choose they want to be energy independent, they can do that. If they choose they want to stick with the power company, they can do that as well. Now, James, I have to ask you about another slightly controversial topic too, because we've also been reporting on this. In fact, as we speak, we have a video that is getting wide distribution on YouTube, talking about all the sort of foul play that's gone on in the solar financing space. Many consumers have gotten burned by solar companies where they took out a loan or a long-term lease on a solar power system, but then the company that did the installation went out of business, and now there's nobody to maintain the system and make sure that the power is generating properly and that the system remains functional. What are your thoughts on what should Congress do, if anything, to protect consumers from some of these, you might call them predatory or just kind of funny business kind of solar financing schemes that are out there? What are your thoughts on the future here?
Yeah, Joe, look, this is one of the most disheartening things about the space. It's part of why I started Signature Solar, which is a DIY solar platform, because I just wanted people to know what the actual hardware costs. And the reason why is I felt like it would be a check and balance to some of the real dishonesty that goes on in this business. I'm all for installers. Most of what we sell is to installers over at EG4 Electronics, and we want to see more people get into that business and make good money. But at the same time, accountability is also needed, right? It can't be some magic substance that people don't understand how much money is being made on. So I think from a top-down level, we always said that, look, if you lived in a world where you couldn't buy oil at the hardware store, Joe, then the oil change mechanic would probably charge $400 for an oil change because you had no other option. And so for us, we've always pushed for transparency, and it's one of the things that we really value about what Solar Surge is doing, which is opening up the conversation to all these different manufacturers and really educating people. We've always advocated education and transparency, but that hasn't happened. So in Texas, we've got some great solar businesses. We got some bad actors. So Senate Bill 1036 in Texas is going to kind of step in, and I think we're supporting it in the Texas legislature. It should be getting out of the Texas House. But I know in the state of Texas, for instance, you're going to have to register if you are in a third-party dealership sales role. And there's a lot of verification and other stuff that's good. So there's a need for some regulation. I think on the deal, the other thing that really has to stop happening is LLC trade organizations, trade contractors making promises past 5 years. The average lifespan of a contracting company isn't that much longer than that. And we need to have insured long-term warranty services sold to the system instead of some promise on a contract. So we've had that problem. I know the people who sign those contracts, the installers will tell you, oh, I mean it, I'll be there for 25 years. Look, you don't know if you're going to get by a car crash in a collision. So that was one aspect. The other aspect was net metering and kind of the disorderly problem that was created around there, because what we're finding is, in many cases around the United States, the reason why people are very upset with their solar deals is because some sales rep acted like net metering was going to run ad infinitum till the end, and they already knew that the power companies had no restrictions to cut it and were incentivized to do so. And so once they sold the deal with the big projection of 25 years of return, the net metering subsidy on their export power with their batteryless system went away. So that gave solar a bad name as well. So warranty insurance, the net metering problem, these kinds of things have been a huge issue, and the finance companies have not taken the kind of risk management role that they probably should have. So, I think that this is now starting to fall on finance companies because they underwrote this debt. They underwrote all these systems that had these issues with the way that they were sold, the way they were projected, and the way their fundamentals fed back. And so is it a Congress thing? I think it's the Federal Trade Commission that needs to work with the attorney generals of these states. I always looked at solar like if you went into your local town, like a certified financial planner, right? CFP, like a Edward Jones or a Raymond James. And they took 30 grand of your money and told you they would invest it well over 50 years. If they operated a fraction as shady and dishonest as any of the sales reps in solar, they'd go to jail. So this is kind of the discipline of solar is an investment, and you have to get to a point where the deal that's being cut is a viable 25-year proposition or 20-year proposition. Is it government's role to get there? Is it will transparency get us there anyway? Would be my only other question. I think it's on a state by state level. We need to see some definite attention there. We need to create some precedent that tells the finance companies that they're on the hook if there's bad debt that was created by a dishonest investment scheme. And I think the finance companies have all the power to self-regulate and just not enable and underwrite this kind of debt that's based on dishonesty and poor transparency. So, I guess it's a long spiel of like things are happening, Joe, and I think things are going to continue to head in the right direction with this space. But I think it's probably not a Congress thing. I think it's probably Federal Trade Commission and state attorneys generals, and we just need to demonstrate that these finance companies are on the hook for the bad debt that they underwrote without collecting the information needed to determine if this was a good deal for the customer.
Yeah. Well, we're seeing a lot of the finance companies come under pressure as well, particularly the ones that are like exclusively solar finance companies where they got involved with charging dealer fees and things like this. But I was contacted not long ago by a lawyer who was also in Texas, who said that he has 1,000 cases. He's representing homeowners that signed up for solar loans. Some of the biggest name solar finance companies out there that you would recognize all of them if I mentioned them. But he's got over 1,000 cases of homeowners where they signed up for a system. They have a loan where they're getting monthly bills for a loan, but the system never got installed or it never was made functional. And the contractor's out of business and there's nobody to provide warranty service. So it's crazy to think that we were able to do that much business with those sorts of terms without really any kind of substantial regulation or licensing. I mean, you can't sell life insurance without a license. You can't sell home mortgages without a license, but you can be a 20, 25-year-old kid and you can sell a $100,000 solar loan where the homeowner signs up on your tablet, doesn't even get to read a physical contract. And now you've placed a lien on their house. You've placed them into debt based on, guarantees of the future performance of the contractor that may or may not happen. And so, we're seeing with these lawsuits, I'd be interesting to see what happens and if that sort of solar loan finance company business model even works once all this stuff, plays through the system.
Well, I absolutely think that the solar loan company business model is going to work. The difference is that people are going to have to take responsibility for the debt they close. Just like if a bank wanted to sell you a car, they've got to confirm that you have the ability to pay and they have the ability to recover, right? And they have to look at that risk profile. They have to own that risk profile. So now we've got, finance companies that are saying, oh, well, the risk profile is not our fault. Well, it totally is. You made an easy button for the guy with the contract. You didn't follow up and make sure the customer even knew the contract they were getting into. You didn't follow up and make sure. And I think what we'll see is another in Texas is going to be a hotbed of this because of the net metering misrepresentation that occurred in Texas was very rampant. So we had a lot of these grids that had, temporary 2-year net metering programs. And people were given, projection of, okay, you can spend $70,000, but we'll save you $500. Don't worry. Well, now they're only saving $180. And they're paying a loan for, $450 that, supposedly was 10% off. And so there's the slam dunk stuff is the guy with 1,000 cases who says he's got like people who are on the hook for loans for systems that never worked or never got installed. That's one thing. But then you've got your other coming wave of people whose loans are 60% upside down, Jeff. And I think all of this comes down to finance has to be smart. I think no one needs to act like we're learning a new lesson in finance, though. I mean, we all lived through 2008 and the repercussions that occurred from that. So, and AI makes this kind of process so much simpler. But yeah, we've heard all kinds of horror stories. I've heard stories of people where they had a sales agency that was literally forging homeowner signatures in communities where people didn't speak English easily. Over here in South Texas. I mean, yeah, there's all kinds of stuff that went wrong. And I think the key thing has got to be whether, we can get the government involved to the nth degree trying to regulate it. I'm not a big fan of that. But I think just a simple fix has got to be you finance it. It's your liability. And if it doesn't give people the return that was promised at the point of contract, guess what, brother? You financed it. So that's really where things need to go. I think a lot of solar finance companies have kind of re-entered the space or reset, or the newer entrants know this, and they're putting price per watt caps. They're validating with the customer. They're really watching this stuff. I know some banks that are now absolutely refusing to do dealer fees, for instance. I'm not against dealer fees. I think it's a good way to buy down interest rates. I am against being dishonest and not disclosing them. So I think I can buy down my interest on my home. Of course, that's perfectly fine, but I do it knowingly. So I think some of the best net interest products in the industry have a dealer fee. If you look at, compared to a straight out interest loan that you can get down to 6.5% with something like a Sunlight Financial. I know, last I checked. And so I'm not against dealer fees. I'm just against the shady tactics that were at play. And I'm also against financiers not owning the liability for this. If financiers own the liability for the system, they're going to make sure that the warranty is insured. They're going to make sure that there's a return. They're going to reduce the risk profile. So I think that's really just the key thing we want to see these attorney generals for these different states prevail at, is demonstrating these finance companies have a responsibility for the deals they fund.
No, I think that's exactly right, and maybe it's just a lack of education on the part of these attorneys general, and not understanding exactly how risky some of these solar financing products can be. Because essentially, what you're talking about is not just the risk of the borrower defaulting, but you're talking about there's the risk of the contractor defaulting, not doing the work, and then the bank has to hire another contractor to finish the job, as well as the risk of, as you mentioned, the risk of a loss of a net metering program, where the customer's payback on the solar system may get cut in half or cut in a quarter if the power company no longer offers a one-for-one buyback for their excess solar generation. So there's a lot of different factors that play into this 25-year projection. And James, I've got to say, I can't think of any other product that you would finance that would come with like a lifetime guarantee or a 25-year guarantee. I mean, even you get a mortgage for a home for 15 or 30 years, but if the air conditioner breaks, you have to go fix it. It's not the bank is not going to fix your air conditioner because they have a 30-year mortgage on the house. It's your responsibility. Same thing with your car. You get a 5-year car note. You need a new transmission. You need to go hire a mechanic and get your transmission fixed. You're not going to have the bank take care of all that for you. But in solar, and maybe it's just because of the way these systems were sold, is like everything is guaranteed perfect for 25 years. There's this expectation with solar that, if something breaks, the contractor will fix it or the bank will fix it.
So this is actually, I think it's in the product space. This is another space that we deal with, which is, all the different warranties that, there's so many companies that are desperate to get into solar batteries, and most of them are based in China. And a lot of them started in China, right? And I think the question in the American market, if you don't ignore the product warranties and insure the product warranty from a third-party standpoint, international corporations acting in the United States are not truly exposed to the jurisdiction of the United States in many, many cases. And this is, I think, this is a problem we have to address, right? Or at least a finance company that wants to make sure that they are covered has to think about the safety of any of these loans. And that is, what kind of equity and assets are in the United States from a multinational company to actually secure this warranty? What if there was an epidemic failure or a problem in the future, or a restriction to access market, caused by, whatever kind of nationalistic restrictions on grid assets like batteries, going overseas and pleading your case in a foreign court is probably not a good idea. It's probably not going to work very well.
Yeah, it's probably not going to work very well.
It's BS, which is why people are throwing around warranties like free candy, right? Warranties have costs. They involve American employees, American infrastructure, reserve, and stuff like that. Like, you have to have a complete operations game on those warranties. And so we're seeing, a lot of startups coming in from all over China that want to participate in the market and whatever. But if you don't have insured warranty on a company, I honestly wouldn't even take an American company for granted either. I would probably just step back and say, look, we've seen so many tech companies go out of business that what you really need is those companies to have third-party warranty insurance programs based on their hardware. that'll also make it easy to get replacement parts in the future. Because there's IP on this legacy hardware, and the reason why operation and maintenance costs so much for solar systems is that people abandon batteries, abandon inverters that they had built years ago, and the industry moves on, and you can't find replacement parts. You basically have to rebuild the whole system. Versus if you can keep the IP for the original technology from 2025, then by 2040, we could build, the control boards for my inverter for less than half of what I'm building them for now and do a field repair on that unit. So we have to figure out ways to take responsibility for the long-term cost of these systems. And everybody has been so obsessed with just selling as much as they can now, which you should be, that they left that long-term cost question in play, which I think this is something that financiers can litigate, right? I think what used to be that when a bank got involved and backed something, you were more safe as an investor because you had a risk management team look at it. So whatever concern I just brought up there, I think would be something that a bank taking responsibility for a system that they finance would have to think about.
Yep, makes a lot of sense. Well, James, I know we're a little bit short on time now, so if you could just briefly summarize here in the next 15 to 30 seconds, if Congress does not put this residential tax credit back in to the big beautiful bill, so-called big beautiful bill, what is going to be the impact on the residential solar industry?
Yeah, I think number one, cutting a credit system 7 years short on and giving a 6 month notice to an industry is for something that's like in the 30% range. I think we're going to see probably 100,000+ trade jobs lost in 26. So definitely negative impact on the trade side. Hardware guys are going to have to try to keep up, which is something I'm prepared to do. But it's going to hurt a lot of solar installers. It's going to actually remove more competition because there won't be enough solar installers in the business to give you a competitive price, which is kind of where we fought this industry for. And it's going to formalize an inherent unfairness in power generation, where we say that homeowners can generate power, but they must do it effectively with their hand tied behind their back. So, within the next 30 days, any of your listeners, anybody who's active in here, who has made jobs in solar, or who really cares about building their own power in the future, everybody's got senators reaching out to those offices and sharing the concern for tax fairness. I think we'll probably share our little policy summary that we have with you, Joe, so you can put it with this video. But sharing the merits of the free market defense of this tax credit, not making it about defending the IRA, and really let's try to make sure that we're heard in this process. Visiting your senator in DC, visiting your local office with something like this, walk through this with them, and really show them the opportunity here to retain a very, very small single-digit percentage sliver of the IRA that has an impact on the future of energy for homeowners, the Main Street economies, and trade jobs. So get involved. And look, if it goes away, we'll all get together as an industry and make the most of it. But it's just as an inherently unfair challenge, which is the only reason why I'm getting involved. If this was free money or subsidies, I don't view those as moral or something I'm involved in supporting politically. But we're up for any challenge in this space. But I think that fighting, with our hand tied behind our back here would not be fun going forward. I don't think this would be a good step. So let's try to put the pressure here and make sure that this system of returning taxpayer money to taxpayers that invest in solar is kept in place.
Great. Now, James, I understand time is of the essence with this. Realistically, how much time do we have until a final version of this bill is passed by the Senate? What do you think?
Well, I think it comes out in June. I think by the end of June, it's headed to the president. It could be July 4th, but I think that's this time schedule. And again, they've got much bigger fish to fry in the Senate. They're facing the potential collapse of the American currency if they do not cut enough money. So there's a lot of aspects at play right now for these folks. But just I think we're a very low involvement in DC industry with a very high impact on Main Street economies, and we just need to put those jobs in front of people. We need to put the homeowner fairness problem in front of people, and we need to advocate that this date is extended back to the original date, and that just some controls are put on the top cost of solar, and also I think storage attachment's a real key point if you're going to have a substantive conversation with a conservative member of Congress, like myself in Texas with the 2 senators I have.
Great. Well, folks, this has been another interview with James Showalter. He's the CEO and founder at EG4 Electronics. Again, one of the major off-grid and hybrid solar system equipment manufacturers based in Texas. James, I thank you again for spending some more time with our audience. As I said, our audience always responds well whenever we do content together. So I appreciate you sharing your insights and your call to action of what we would like to see happen here. I mean, you heard from, potentially 100,000 jobs lost in the construction trades. This is not a partisan issue, in my opinion. This is something that's good for America. It's good for energy independence, and certainly it's good for the construction trades, particularly the electrical trade. So we certainly would like to see that tax credit extended. James, I'll give you the last word.
No, thanks for having me, Joe. Like I say, this is important. If you watch this podcast and you get the picture here, go about it the right way, but do act right. We're going to live in the reality that politics creates for us after this bill gets through. And I'm sure we're going to overcome as an industry one way or the other. But this is really a moment where we can advocate for a fair and free market in residential solar. And we need to check that box and do that. So field offices, red state viewers, we need to be looking for Republican senators that are open to free market pro-homeowner conversations. I think there's a lot of them. I don't think this is a right versus left issue on the homeowner setup. This should have been a 90% issue. Unfortunately, it's kind of strapped into the IRA mix, which frankly is a package the country can't afford, in my own estimation, based on back of the napkin math. So jump in and get involved and help separate this out and let people know about the people you employ, the way it works for the homeowners you serve. And let's make sure that this conversation is heard. Or if you're a homeowner that's looking to invest in independent energy, let your senator know that you want to be able to do this on a fair taxation basis.
Great. James, we're going to leave it at that. Folks, as always here, we try to have the best experts on in the space. James is definitely one of those experts. We've been talking about potential impact of the loss of the residential solar tax credit. But that pretty much does it for today's episode. I thank you all for spending some more time on the Solar Surge channel. And as always, I'm Joe Ordia here, encouraging you to get prepared and be empowered. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.